daily.
Hey, look at me. You're telling me you can't stand up? Right now.
I told you, man, I can't. I don't have control below my waist.
That's real convenient. I see people fake this every night. Don't lie to me.
I'm not lying. I was hit by a drunk driver.
Check what? You expect me to just take your word?
Spinal cord injury, City Hospital.
The body cam starts recording before anyone notices the wheelchair. Fluorescent lights hum over cracked asphalt. A patrol unit idles, heat shimmering off the hood. The officer's voice is clipped, procedural until it isn't. Stand up for me. The man looks down at his legs, then back up, calm but wounded. He has paperwork, he has a chair, he has a lifetime of adaptation. What he doesn't have is the patience for a system that confuses authority with truth and dignity with defiance. If stories like this matter to you not as outrage but as evidence, stay with us. Subscribe. Not for spectacle, but for accountability. Because justice isn't loud when it works. It's quiet, documented, and hard-won. The patrol car rolls to a stop with a soft hydraulic sigh. Tires crunching gravel at the edge of the lot. Late afternoon light slants low, catching dust in the air, turning it gold for a second before the door opens and the moment fractures. The body cam clicks on automatically. Policy requires activation during any citizen contact. A small red diode, blinking like a quiet witness. The officer steps out, one hand resting near his vest, the other adjusting the camera. He scans the scene the way he was taught, hands waistband distance. The wheelchair sits half on the curb, half in the street, angled awkwardly as if the man paused mid-thought. He's in his 40s, maybe older, the kind of age that doesn't announce itself loudly. His posture is upright, practiced. Years of learning how to hold space without taking too much of it. His legs are still folded beneath a blanket despite the heat. Sir, the officer says, voice clipped. Professional, what's going on here? The man looks up, squinting slightly against the sun. Just waiting on a ride, he replies, calm. No rush. His hands rest on his lap, palms open. A habit he learned long before today. The officer nods, eyes moving, not malicious, not kind. Just efficient. I gotta call about someone blocking traffic. I'm not blocking anyone, the man says gently. A sedan passes behind them, slow but unbothered. There's a pause, the kind that stretches when neither side knows it's about to become something else. Training fills the silence, command presence. Establish control early. The officer shifts his weight. Stand up for me. The words land wrong, not loud, not aggressive, just misplaced. The man blinks once, then looks down at his legs, then back up. A small breath escapes him, not a sigh. More like a recalibration. I can't, he says. The officer's brow tightens. I need you to stand up. I'm in a wheelchair. The man replies, still calm. He gestures slightly with his chin, as if the chair itself should be evidence enough. The officer leans in a fraction, the camera catching the movement, the faint rustle of nylon. Sir, I need you to comply with my instructions. Compliance, a word that carries weight. In the academy, it's drilled early. Verbal commands first. Escalate only as necessary. But the manuals also say something else. Quieter, often skipped officer must consider apparent disabilities when issuing commands. It's there in the policy, subsection B, rarely quoted aloud. The man reaches into a side pouch slowly, narrating every movement. I have documentation, he says, medical. I can show you. Hands where I can see them. The officer snaps, reflexive. They freeze together in that instant. The man's hand halfway. The officer's voice sharper than intended. The camera records the microsecond where trust could have lived. I'm trying to help you, the man says softly now, not pleading, explaining. The officer exhales through his nose. You're being uncooperative. That word too. Uncooperative. It's a checkbox on a report, a justification that can stretch to fit almost anything. The officer takes a step back, radio crackling at his shoulder. He glances at the chair again, as if seeing it for the first time or choosing not to. Stand up, he repeats. Louder, for the camera. For the record. Around them, life keeps moving. A shopping cart rattles across the lot. Somewhere, a car door slams. The sun dips behind a cloud, flattening the light, cooling the scene. The man's jaw tightens, just a little. Years of therapy, of learning patience, of explaining his body to strangers condensed into this moment. I can't do what you're asking, he says, and you know that. The officer's hand hovers uncertain now, caught between procedure and reality. The camera hums, indifferent. In that space between a command and an impossibility, the stop stops being routine. And something irreversible begins. The fluorescent glare of the precinct washes over everything like a cheap filter, harsh and unforgiving. The man is seated in a small holding area, wheelchair angled toward the wall, hands folded neatly over the blanket that covers his legs. Every tick of the clock echoes louder here. Outside, the station hums, with the usual teletypes clattering, dispatch calls bouncing. Off concrete walls, but inside this little room. Time is measured differently. Each second stretches, weighted by anticipation, by the invisible ledger of judgment. The officer sits across from him at a scratched metal table, fingers drumming a rhythm that betrays impatience. Reports have already been filed, timestamps, code numbers, boxes checked, and yet they feel hollow. Internal review protocols dictate that the initial incident report be written immediately, verified against body cam footage. Supervisors insist on meticulous notes, statements, demeanor, responses, but the words on paper flatten the room. They cannot capture the subtle tremor in the man's voice when he says, "Again, I can't stand. I'm disabled." A junior officer enters with a stack of forms. Internal Affairs wants the full log, he says, handing over folders stamped with dates and signatures. The weight of the paperwork is symbolic, a bureaucracy-made sword hovering between the two men. The man flips through the pages, his hands steady, reading every word. Each line a reminder that reality is rarely aligned with procedure. A knock at the door announces someone else, an advocate, calm but purposeful, carrying medical documentation. Disability certifications, hospital letters, physiotherapy notes. They land on the table one by one, an arsenal of evidence. The man leans back, letting them speak first, observing the officer as he reads. His silence is strategic, measured, but not passive. Every slight pause, every micro-expression on the officer's face becomes a battleground. You're citing non-compliance. The advocate says, voice low, firm. The law defines compliance in the context of capacity. This isn't subjective. Out of guidelines, local disability statutes, each reference sharp as a scalpel. The officer flips a page, lips pressed into a thin line. There's a protocol here for internal dispute resolution. Supervisors review body cam footage without sound, first to remove bias. Compare statements. Verify procedural adherence. The room waits while the officer absorbs what he sees. The man finally speaks, soft but steady. "I followed the law. You ignored it." The words hang in the fluorescent light, unyielding, factual. Not accusatory, just true. The officer's jaw tightens. This is no longer just about the stop. It is about authority, about what it means to wield power responsibly. The tension is palpable, filling the air like static before a storm. Outside the room, the precinct moves on. A training poster about de-escalation and communication hangs crooked on the wall. Officers pass. Radios crackling. Policies are cited. Verbal commands, situational assessment, escalation procedures. Yet here, in this smaller room, the practical application of those policies falters, revealing a gap between theory and execution. Internal memos are drafted while the advocate's presence ensures that every motion is documented, every procedure traced back to its origin. The man looks at the officer, a quiet defiance in his posture. "I complied the only way I could," he says. "Now it's your turn to comply with the law." There is no malice, just expectation. In response, the officer's hand twitches over the report, fingers tightening around the pen. He's aware of cameras, procedures, potential disciplinary action. The rules he once relied on to protect him now constrain him. The clock ticks, fluorescent hum persistent, until the room contracts with a different kind of pressure. Internal Affairs has issued a notice for a formal review. The paperwork, once abstract, becomes a living instrument of consequence. Every line, every timestamp, every noted hesitation in the body cam footage will be dissected. And through it all, the man remains seated, wheelchair angle present, unshaken, a quiet anchor of truth amid procedural turbulence. Beyond the walls, the city continues. Cars speed past the station, pedestrians talk, unaware of the quiet moral calculus unfolding inside. And in that confined space, two people sit opposite each other, each bound by the rules of their world, one by duty, the other by law and lived experience. What began as a routine check has now morphed into a test of systemic integrity, of procedural fidelity, of human conscience. And neither the man nor the officer will leave unchanged. The man rolls down the quiet corridor of his apartment complex, wheels humming softly against the pavement. The evening is humid, the kind that clings to your skin and leaves the air. Heavy with distant city smells, cooked bread, car exhaust, damp concrete. His hands press the rims with practiced precision, muscles remembering every motion, every friction point, like a piano player who knows the keys by touch rather than sight. The stop at the precinct lingers, a residue that refuses to wash away. His body remembers the command he could not obey, the officer's impatience, the fluorescent glare that turned his chair into a stage for judgment. He stops outside the local grocery, pulling out his phone. Notifications blink, news clips, Social media posts chatter about the incident. Some show the body cam footage, cropped, slowed, captions dripping outrage. His face remains calm as he scrolls, but his chest tightens, not with anger, more with the exhaustion of being seen as a problem rather than a person. The ADA guidelines, his therapist's advice, hospital visits, they all form a map of survival he's walked for decades. Now, the world sees the intersection of law and lived experience, raw and unedited. Inside, he navigates the aisles with precision, a dance perfected over years. Each turn of the wheel, each reach for a shelf, is a testament to the small triumphs of adaptation. Yet every movement is a reminder. The body remembers more than the mind can sometimes articulate. A sudden jolt, a cart rolled carelessly nearby makes him flinch. Muscle memory reacts faster than thought. The stop, the commands, the accusations, they are etched into the subtle tension that courses through his limbs. His body speaks a language no courtroom transcript can capture. Later, in the quiet of his living room, he reviews the deposition notes, reading aloud the phrases. He will repeat in front of cameras and committees, "I followed the law to the letter. I complied within my capacity." The words sound measured, almost rehearsed. Yet his pauses betray the physical toll. Sitting still for so long, reliving the stop, replaying every command, every expectation he could not meet. He remembers hospital corridors, sterile walls, physiotherapists' voices reminding him of limits. His body, once his tool, has become a ledger of constraint and resistance. Each movement a record of resilience. He places a call to a disability rights expert, someone versed in procedural nuance and the gaps that allow authority to overreach. They ignore the capacity assessment, he says quietly. "I didn't disobey. They misread my body." Across the line, the voice listens, annotates, validates. It is not comfort, exactly, but a recognition that law and lived reality are often at odds. They discuss training protocols, use of force continuums, and the subtle omissions in officer manuals that allow bias to slip through. Each term, each policy, becomes a shield, an explanation, a tool to wield against the systemic weight he now faces. Evening deepens. Outside, the streetlights flicker on, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls of the building. He leans back in his chair, eyes closing for a moment, feeling the ache in muscles that bear silent witness to decades of adaptation. His mind drifts briefly to the officer, to the training videos, the internal memo, the small cubicles where decisions are sanitized into procedural language. He imagines the officer replaying the footage alone, perhaps recognizing the human he had confronted, perhaps not. Memory, however, is not impartial. It etches both triumph and violation into the flesh. The phone buzzes again, a message from a journalist seeking comment. The body cam clip is already circulating, viral and raw. He responds slowly, deliberately, aware of how words will be interpreted against moving images. The man on the screen is him, yes, but also a symbol of procedural failure, a quiet testament to what bodies remember when institutions fail to account for them. He types, "I will speak for my capacity, not for my inconvenience." The phrase is careful, protective, a distillation of experience into language. Outside, rain begins to patter lightly against the asphalt, hissing off the wheelchair's rubber rims as he maneuvers down the street. The droplets trace paths along his arms, cooling, grounding. Each turn, each press, reminds him the body carries history, but it also carries agency. Every movement is deliberate, a statement against the reductive force of bureaucracy. Even as the footage spreads, even as the city whispers about compliance and defiance, he remains embodied in the truth of his own capacity, a slow, precise rebellion written in motion. And yet, despite this quiet control, a tremor lingers. Not fear, more the subtle realization that exposure changes things. People will see, judge, debate, legislate, but only his body knows the cost of commands unheeded. It is an intimate ledger, inked in tension and muscle memory. Every evening will echo the stop, every wheel turn will carry the weight of expectation. Every public eye will meet the calm he cultivates but does not own. The city woke the next morning to a different rhythm. Headlines scrolled across digital billboards, officer questions disabled man, public outrage grows. News vans circle the precinct like vultures, cameras mounted, lenses catching every angular shadow of the building's concrete facade. The body cam clip, once confined to internal review, had escaped. Its grainy clarity and unflinching frame exposed every detail of command. The refusal, the tension between flesh and procedure. Inside the station, the air was dense, a mixture of coffee, fluorescent hum, and quiet panic. The officer walked the hallways with a stiffness he had not felt before. He could sense eyes on him, not just the cameras, but colleagues whispering behind plexiglass partitions. Union representatives arrived early, briefcases heavy with precedent and grievance forms. They cited policy, departmental hierarchy, even historical examples of complaints dismissed quietly. Yet each statistic, each prior incident, only added weight to the footage now floating in public consciousness. The law demanded process, but public scrutiny demanded accountability, and the two were not always aligned. A press conference was called outside the precinct. Reporters clustered, microphones angled, cameras panning like predators circling prey. The chief read from a prepared statement, "All procedures are under review. Internal Affairs is conducting a thorough examination. We remain committed to lawful, ethical enforcement." The words were neutral, polished, but behind them, the tension rippled. Training manuals cited without substance, procedural language offered without reflection. Every journalist knew that the statement was a shield, and the shield had cracks. The officers' past complaints resurfaced, archived incidents dusted off by reporters and activists. Minor disputes, seemingly inconsequential, now painted a pattern and narrative of oversight, of repeated escalation where de-escalation might have sufficed. The union objected to the public trial, citing due process, while disability rights organizations flooded city council with letters and petitions demanding reform. In every forum, council meetings, social media threads, community gatherings, the question was no longer just about the stop. It was about what systemic tolerance had allowed to occur unchecked. Inside Internal Affairs, footage was reviewed frame by frame. Supervisors noted pauses, micro-expressions, the cadence of commands. Procedural gaps became apparent. The officers' lack of explicit consideration for documented disability, failure to employ alternative communication methods, omission of escalation, de-escalation techniques taught during the academy. The officer, sitting across from his own supervisor, could see the layers of scrutiny unfolding. For once, the rules he had relied on to justify his authority were used to measure him against the law he was meant to serve. Outside, the man in the wheelchair watched the events unfold from his apartment window. He saw the cameras, the microphones, the articles stacking up like bricks in a wall of collective attention. For the first time, the story was no longer private, no longer contained in bureaucratic boxes. It was alive, public, a reflection of procedural failure and personal endurance alike. Legal advisors discussed motions and filings. Journalists debated ethical framing. City council members drafted emergency meetings. Exposure was no longer incidental, it was transformative. And yet, the tension remained human. The officer, alone in a quiet office, replayed the footage with sound for the first time. The words, the refusal, the calm defiance, it was all there, undeniable. And it struck differently than the silent reviews. The camera caught his subtle shifts, the tightening of his jaw, the involuntary pause when he realized the law he thought protected him could also bind him. Every frame was a mirror. Outside the station, protesters gathered, holding signs with simple truths: respect capacity, justice is procedural and human. The media captured the faces, the chants, the cadence of mortal demand. Conversations erupted in city council chambers. Policies long ignored the use of force continuum, disability awareness training, command language review were suddenly under urgent discussion. The officers' union filed motions to protect him, but the momentum of exposure had shifted. Procedural safety nets that once worked invisibly were now illuminated under fluorescent scrutiny and public gaze. In the midst of it all, the man continued his daily routines, rolling through the streets, visiting the grocery store, navigating the ramps and alleys of the city. He embodied the very capacity that had been questioned. The footage, the headlines, the meetings, they swirled around him, but he remained steady, a quiet axis of lived experience. And for the first time, he realized that exposure was not merely visibility, it was leverage, the power to force reflection, change, and systemic accountability. By evening, the city council convened an emergency session. Legal advisors presented frameworks for reform, mandatory disability recognition training, revised command protocols, early intervention systems for repeated complaints. The officer, once untouchable in routine procedure, faced the tangible consequences of public scrutiny and procedural failure. Exposure had translated not into spectacle, but into the slow, grinding machinery of reform, a system bending, if only slightly, toward recognition and responsibility that ran streaked the courthouse windows like slow tears, distorting the fluorescent lights inside. The man maneuvered his wheelchair through the polished lobby, rims whispering against the stone floor. Reporters' cameras flickered outside, but inside the world was quieter, almost suspended. He paused near the steps, taking in the room, the polished wood of the judge's bench. Weight of statutes lining the shelves, the hum of fluorescent lighting that never quite felt worn. Everything was procedural. Everything was deliberate. Justice, in its measured cadence, had a cost, and it was not only financial, nor only bureaucratic. The officer arrived later, escorted by a lieutenant, his uniform crisp but his posture stiff. The Internal Affairs report had recommended termination, though he had resigned before the formal notice could land. The resignation was quiet, almost invisible illegal maneuver that allowed him to leave without the ceremonial weight of public firing. Yet within those walls, the echoes of consequence lingered. He walked past the same polished floors, past the law books and clerk desks, feeling the invisible ledger of accountability press against him. Every procedural misstep, every ignored guideline, every micro-expression recorded and analyzed, these had real weight now. The man rolled toward the mediation room, where city officials, disability advocates, and legal representatives had gathered. Discussions were practical, grounded in policy, revised use of force continuums, mandatory disability awareness, formalized checks for compliance with ADA standards. These were not lofty ideas, they were rules with teeth, enforceable, codified, measurable. The room was filled with quiet calculation, not celebration. Justice here was neither dramatic nor vengeful. It was the careful architecture of change, piecing together systemic flaws with procedural mortar. He listened as city council members spoke in calm, deliberate tones, each word weighed for its legal and ethical resonance. "We have a duty to ensure officers understand capacity," one said. "Training alone will not suffice. Oversight mechanisms must be transparent and forcible." Another outlined the early warning systems designed to flag repeated procedural violations. Policies, they stressed, must intersect with human judgment, not replace it. The man understood these mechanisms better than most. He had lived the consequences of their absence. Outside, rain continued its steady drum on the city streets, puddles reflecting, flashing blue and red lights from police vehicles that passed without urgency. He thought of the officer, the man who had once commanded compliance he could never give. The officer's face had been recorded, examined, dissected frame by frame, and yet there had been no personal confrontation here, no shouting, no courtroom theatrics. The consequence was structural, systemic, measured. The cost of justice had been exacted not through spectacle, but through reform, through the slow, meticulous correction of a flawed procedure. He felt the weight of that cost in his own body, muscles tired from years of adaptation, joints reminding him of limits the system rarely acknowledged, nerves attuned to commands he could not obey. Justice had a price, and it was measured not only in resignations and reforms, but in lived experience. Every city ramp, every intersection, every encounter carried the invisible ledger of demand and compliance, of law and embodiment. The world was changing, incrementally, structurally, but the body remembered every transgression, every command unmet, every procedural oversight. The officer's resignation did not erase the past, but it allowed for a quiet reckoning. The department implemented new policies, trainers adjusted manuals, internal affairs refined early warning systems. Cameras recorded differently now. Supervisors checked compliance with added diligence. The procedural environment shifted imperceptibly, but in ways that would ripple outward over years. Justice had been applied not as a theatrical verdict, but a systemic recalibration. In the final moments, the man paused outside the courthouse steps, the rain pattering against the wheelchair's rims, reflecting neon lights and fractured patterns. He looked toward the city streets, toward the places where encounters would continue, where policies would now intersect with lives in tangible ways. The world had changed, subtly but irrevocably. He had not sought revenge, nor vindication. He had demanded recognition. That recognition cost the system time, scrutiny, structural adaptation. It cost the officer his career, cost every observer uncomfortable reckoning with authority and compliance. And yet, the man felt a quiet affirmation. Justice had been neither easy nor dramatic. It was precise, procedural, morally resonant. It reminded the city, and the institutions within it, that accountability is earned not in the loud applause of closure, but in the slow, deliberate architecture of change. Every ramp installed, every training revised, every command now measured against law and capacity were the echoes of cost, the invisible ledger of consequence that would continue long after the rain subsided. He wheeled forward, leaving the courthouse behind, the room still humming with the quiet machinery of justice. His body, scarred with memory and experience, carried both the story and its cost. Outside, the city pulsed on, indifferent yet subtly shifted. And in that shift lay the resonance of a system learning, slowly but inexorably, that the human body, the law, and conscience must intersect if justice is ever to be more than a word.